Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on. Alright, and as it is the 19th of March, we are going to be watching Glory Road from 2006, directed by James Gartner and starring Josh Lucas. So as I've mentioned in the past, I'm not a big fan of these underdog sort of sports movies. Now, when it comes to like comedy and all that sort of thing, I understand, yeah, sure, whatever, sports films are kind of cool as comedies. But when it comes to having a dramatic retelling of a sports story, it is always because of some sort of situation that needs to be overcome. To me, the dramatic retelling of actual sports events just seems to be the same storyline all over again. It's always an underdog story, and the team that we're watching end up winning the big game in the end and becoming like champions and all that. And it always seems to be the same thing over and over again. Not to say that they're not good. The ones that I have seen, I have enjoyed for the most part. But again, it's not something that I would personally seek out. So that being said, like I already mentioned, this movie does star Josh Lucas, as well as Derek Luke, Austin Nicholas, John Voight, Evan Jones, Shin A.S. Kerr, Alfonso McGurley, and Emily Deschanel. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we are dealing with an actual event that actually did happen. This basketball coach of Don Haskins, played by Josh Lucas, was brought in to be the basketball coach for the Texas Western University. He was charged with trying to come up with a successful team, and he ended up acquiring several black students to become part of this team. Now, at the core of this, it's basically the struggle of dealing with racism, how these black students, these young men, are brought into a situation where it is normally very rare to have more than one or two black players on a team at a time that rarely get any play time. But this coach has picked these specific gentlemen for their skills to play the game. And eventually the team does meld as both black and white players coming together, but it's the other people around that we end up dealing with a lot of racial strife pointed towards this team. A lot of slurs, a lot of property damage, and even one of the actual players getting assaulted basically in the bathroom of a restaurant that the rest of the team is currently unaware of happening. And like every underdog story, we get this team to come together, and they eventually end up winning at the end of the movie to become the best team of the land at the time. The difference is the coach decides to go against an all-white team to put all of his all-black players only in the final game of this NCAA tournament. And that just happens to be on March 19th, 1966. And that's about an hour and 30 minutes into this 1 hour and 58 minute long movie. And as it is the 20th of March, we are going to be watching Emelia from 2009, directed by Mara Nair and starring Hilary Swank. So prior to the actual watching of this movie, I really basically just knew the bare bones of Amelia Earhart's just basic story about the historical significance she made on aviation, and that's pretty much about it. Didn't know much about her backstory or anything, and I don't think I was privy to wanting to know that information. Along comes this movie, which obviously, as I'm saying, this is the first time I've seen this movie. Got to know a little more about what went into this woman becoming the legend that she is. That being said, not only does this movie star Hilary Swank, but it also stars Richard Gere, Ewan McGregor, Christopher Eccleston, William Cuddy, Mia Wasikowska, and Cherry Jones. So this movie goes on to cover Emelia's life as it leads up to her plan to circumvent the entire planet. It starts with her as a bit of a stunt sort of casting sort of situation where she's the first female passenger to fly across the Atlantic, becoming a bit of a celebrity in the eyes of the press and the public, eventually becoming the first solo female pilot to cross the Atlantic, and then basically starts culminating into a lucrative promotional deals with different companies, backing her up. She starts to go into different aerial endeavors, and eventually leading up to the situation that she is famously known for. So like I had mentioned, I didn't know much about her personal life. This movie sort of focuses on that, where she gets not only involved with her promoter and and who is also a publisher himself of George Putman, who is Richard Gere in this movie. She sort of finds a friendly relationship with Jean Vidal, who is Ewan McGregor. Eventually, Earhart and Putman get married, and through some publicity and endorsement campaigns, she even gets the chance to actually give Eleanor Roosevelt an actual flight in one of her planes. Eventually, Putman gets Purdue University to foot the bill for the round-the-world flight. So in the movie, Hilary Swank does a fantastic job at portraying this historical character of Amelia Earhart. Richard Gere seems to be a little bit of seems like a huckster at sometimes sort of thing, just basically keeping her involved with his life for her popularity, but eventually and all that sort of thing. Ewan McGregor is charming in the little bit that he has in this, and a surprising Christopher Eccleston, who ends up being her navigator on her worldwide flight to, sadly, unfortunately, is the one thing that was a surprise to me in the story, not realizing that she actually, again, she was doing all the flying. He was just navigating. He had nothing to do with her flying. He was just saying, hey, you got to go this way, and that's where she went. So she did all the piloting. But again, until this movie, I didn't realize that she, of course, makes sense that she would have to have someone, especially on that big epic of a flight. But it's kind of interesting to know about Christopher Eccleston and hearing him have this American accent that is just so not like. It's another thing too. Both Hilary Swank and Richard Gere put on accents, like a southern sort of style accent, so it seems kind of weird and all that. Whereas Ewan McGregor just comes in with the typical Ewan McGregor voice. One of my other favorite things about this kind of movie is the scenes where they include one of those, hey, I know that area. And there's a sequence near the beginning of the movie where they're walking down a very familiar looking area. And I'm going, hey, wait a sec, that's Toronto Union Station. Quick little Google search, and it turns out, yep, they shot a portion of this in Union Station. So to begin this actual around the world flight, she starts off in Hawaii, and on March 20th, 1937, she crashes the plane on the first takeoff attempt, which happens about an hour and 14 minutes into this 1 hour and 52-minute movie. And as it is the 21st of March, we're going to be watching THX 1138 from 1971, directed by George Lucas and starring Robert Duvall. So to begin with, if it's not already known, I myself am a huge Star Wars fan. I am a big fan of the series since it was so early in my life that it came into it, and I fell in love with the cinematic experience of it. That drove me on later on in life to find out more about George Lucas, as throughout the 70s and 80s, his name was synonymous with big budget box office blockbusters. And everything that he did was guaranteed to be a huge, not only event to watch in the theaters, but also financially as well. That being said, like I mentioned, not only did this movie star Robert Duvall, but it also stars Donald Pleasance, Don Pedro Colley, Maggie McOmie, Ian Wolfe, Marshall Efron, and Sid Haig. Now, to begin with, this isn't a movie that is going to appeal to a lot of people. We've got a very dystopian, very controlled sort of environment, very Orwellian, 1984 style, but set off into the distant future of the 25th century, where people work practically like drones, mandatory usage of drugs to stabilize the society. It's very minimalist. There's a lot of white rooms. There's a lot of very lacking in detail of looks of places. There is a lot, however, of watching this, you can see the DNA of Star Wars has THX 1138. Besides the whole entire using the THX as the sound system that Lucas brought forth to put into movie theaters to properly display his movies, which became the norm for decades afterwards, and as well as moving into the home market as well. This movie itself centers around our main character of THX 1138, who is Robert Duvall, which kind of timely to be able to talk about a movie, hence his just recent passing, where his body seems to be rejecting the drug program to keep him stable, and he's dealing with having issues of uncertainty, whereas several people throughout this version of existence also seem to be doing it, but we're focusing in on this particular gentleman, where him and his mate of LUH 3417, played by Maggie McOmi, just trying to figure out how to live. One of the things in this dystopian future is not only is everyone controlled by drugs, but sex has been outlawed. And through setup of circumstances, the two end up coupling together as part of his punishment. He is operated on to try and correct any sort of malfunction within his system, sort of like a robot. So again, this is a difficult movie to kind of watch if you're not really set into this. Like if you're not into this movie by like minute 10, you're like going to be writing out the next like 80 minutes, like really, really difficult and all that sort of thing. But again, me being a fan, saw it, seen it several times. I'm not going to say it's my favorite movie, that's by any chance, but the fact that it is this early in the career of George Lucas is just something that appeals to me, and that's the part that appeals to me, because it's early Lucas, and you can see a lot of what sci-fi stuff came out. Like a lot of THX is imprinted on Star Wars, like the first Star Wars, A New Hope, the 1977. So the movie itself starts off pretty much at almost 3 minutes into the movie. We find out that it is the 21st of March, sometime in one of the years of the 25th century. There are two versions of the movie. There is the theatrical release, which was hour and 26 minutes long, and then there is also a director's cut that is an hour and 29 minutes in length. I myself watched the director's cut because it basically has no relevance to the opening of the movie. All right, and as this is the 22nd of March, we are going to be watching Cinderella Man from 2005, directed by Ron Howard and starring Russell Crowe. So while I am very well aware of this movie having been made, I did not know who the subject matter was. I did not realize it was actually based on a true story. I do know about this movie because it is a Ron Howard film to begin with, and I do enjoy seeing his movies. However, this is the first time getting around to seeing this movie. And like I had mentioned earlier, the movie does star Russell Crowe, as well as Renee Zellweger, Paul Giamatti, Bruce McGill, Craig Burko, Patty Constantine, David Huband, and Connor Price. So we're dealing with a based on true events underdog sports movie. Seems to be the theme. But I guess when you're going to be doing a movie, this is definitely some sort of thing that you're going to do. Again, we're doing with a biography of an actual person, so it's not like we're doing a sports event like a hockey game or a basketball game. This is one family's struggle in the through the 1930s, dealing with the Depression and a boxer of some note coming upon hard times and then eventually climbing his way back up to success. Ron Howard does a fabulous job of bringing across the emotional core of the characters, which are portrayed by our main cast of Russell Crowe and Renee Zellweger, as well as Paul Giamatti doing a fantastic as his co-lead. But again, one of the fun things about living in the area that I live in, the opening shot when they're coming out of Madison Square Gardens, which looks awfully familiar, and as I looked it up, it's like, yes, it's the Hudson Bay Company that they're coming out of downtown Toronto, where a good portion of this movie was filmed, here and in Hamilton. So once James J. Braddock, who is Russell Crowe, starts making his comeback, He gets through a couple of fights, starts winning, and then he's able to, he pays the back the welfare money that he exchanged. One of those fights, which is against Art Lasky, happens on March 22nd, 1935, which is about 1 hour and 18 minutes into this 2-hour and 24-minute movie. And at that year's Oscars, it did get a couple of recognition nominations by the Academy Awards, including Best Editing, Best Makeup, and Best Supporting Actor for Paul Giamatti. And as it is the 23rd of March, we are going to be watching Singin' in the Rain from 1952, directed by Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen, and starring Gene Kelly. So to begin with, at an early age, I was introduced to this movie. I believe probably was, again, one of those Saturday night at the movies sort of thing on TVO. My parents being big fans of movies to begin with, and especially the musical. This was an early introduction of my knowledge of movies into the musical realm, and I think this is probably one of the earliest ones that I can remember actually seeing. Big fan of musicals, big fans of slapstick comedy, which this movie has a lot of, and it's just a very fun movie to see that I've watched several times throughout my life so far. And as I had mentioned earlier, not only does the movie star Gene Kelly, but it also stars Donald O'Connor, Deborah Reynolds, Gene Hagen, Millard Mitchell, Sid Charisse, and Rita Moreno. So this movie kind of covers a lot of tropes that I really enjoy in movies. Not only are we dealing with a musical, but we're dealing with slapstick comedy. We are dealing with big dance numbers. We are dealing with stunts as our main characters of Don Lockwood and Cosmo Brown, who are Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor, going through like vaudeville and whatnot. One of my other favorite tropes is movies about movies, and that's what this particular movie is. While it is filmed in the 50s, it actually reflects back on an earlier time in the history of movies when they started to go from silent films to talkies, and that's the big transition at one point during this movie. And then we get a satire of Hollywood at the time in the 30s and how the studios treated their stars and their lesser stars, and how the media was reflected upon them as well. Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds have a fantastic chemistry in this movie, and again, we don't start off with it, which is kind of cool. Eventually they end up, he is smitten with her from the get-go, and she eventually ends up falling back for him and all that. But again, it's this whole entire look at the industry right now, and this movie is a perfect example of what a musical is all about, where you go into a sequence and then all of a sudden everyone's singing and dancing for no particular reason, and then they cut right back to reality as if something shifts and all that. We do have a couple of musical numbers that are just put in there as musical numbers, as a hey, let's film this musical number, and then we have a musical number, and then they cut back and it's like, okay, so that really wasn't sort of like a musical thing, that was just them filming a musical sequence for their upcoming movie, which is kind of neat how the movie plays it both ways, even leading to a future point in the movie where Gene Kelly says, hey, this next scene should go like this, and then we cut to the musical number, and then they cut back to him in the office with producer and all that sort of thing, and saying, well, I can't really visualize that, so I guess I'll have to see it when you guys do it. So that sort of twist on a musical comedy. And there's no reason why this movie is not considered a classic. And again, it hits all the notes of what it is. Not only a comedy, but it's got even romance. It's got musical numbers. It's got fantastic dancing. Again, we got charismatic stars leading this whole entire picture. And it's just a fun time to watch. So the first talkie movie that the production studio that Don Lockwood is dealing with is a movie called The Dueling Cavaliers. There is a lot of problems with the movie, especially integrating sound into this picture, and the actual movie itself has its premiere on March 23rd, 1930, which is about 55 minutes into this 1 hour and 42-minute movie. And at the Oscars for that particular year, it ended up getting nominations for Best Supporting Actress for Jean Harden and Best Original Music Score. And as it is the 24th of March, we are going to be watching The Breakfast Club from 1985, directed by John Hughes and starring Emilio Estevez. So those of you that did not experience your teens in the 80s probably missed out in probably some of the best filmmaking for an era of movie watchers. And that would be generally anything that had John Hughes' name attached to it. This would be one of the pinnacles of that entire collection of movies. However, later on there would be quite other ones that would become just as influential and as groundbreaking as this one was at its time. Again, a movie that led to a lot of lexicons into the culture of the time. The sad thing is I never got to see this movie in its theatrical run when it originally came out, but I did and have seen it several times since. And as previously mentioned, the movie does not only star Emilio Estevez, it also goes on to star Paul Gleason, Michael Anthony Hall, Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, Ali Sheedy, and John Kapelos. So this movie deals with a group of students who are having to deal with a Saturday-long detention at their high school. Each of them having a different reason for being there. We run the gambit of different personalities for these characters as they culminate together and deal with basically teenagers being teenagers. The movie itself, written and directed by John Hughes, does a fantastic job of exploring and analyzing the youth of the era, not to mention how the impact basically spreads throughout the genre of basically teen movies. This being the epicenter of a fantastically written and acted performance from this youthful cast all the way through. This being one of those cornerstones of the grouping of actors at the time that eventually became known as the Brat Pack. This is your core group. These 5 individuals basically bouncing back and forth between different projects and all that, being intertwined together. A couple other names get added to that list of the Brat Pack later on, but here's what we have is what feels like more of a grounded perception of the youth at the time than any other movie to or even since have been able to deal with. The movie deals with a lot of trauma and peer pressure from both friends and family. We see how each of these characters has a huge struggle to get over, how they are trying their best to be their best, and each of them finding out that they are coming up short. And it's this group of individuals that they come together and find that their individuality is what makes them great. Even though each of them are a little bit of everything. They're a bit of a criminal, an athlete, a brain, a princess, and a basket case. Probably one of the earliest examples of movies and their phrases being brought into the lexicon of reality. This movie is endlessly quotable for all different reasons, from comedic to serious. And it's just a wonderful tribute to a time that at the moment was very innocent, bringing forward such deep-seated problems that were hiding behind the facade of a fake front. So it's at the very beginning of the movie that it is announced that the actual detention is being held on Saturday, March 24th, 1984. And that's about 2 minutes into this 1 hour and 38-minute movie. All right, and as this is the 25th of March, we are going to be watching The Great Escape from 1963, directed by John Sturges and starring Steve McQueen. So from an early point in my memories of movie watching, this is probably one of the first ones to stand out as a movie that I'm pretty sure I saw on like Saturday afternoon television. I kind of sort of remember watching it at my grandparents' place, my grandfather being a fan of this particular movie or these types of movies. I'm not 100% sure how it goes. We're talking quite a bit far back in my memory. Either like the ensemble cast or war picks or just Steve McQueen to begin with, this is one that I can remember seeing very early on in, like I said, in my experience of watching actual movies. Eventually, finally seeing it as like a full film, I think not until I was actually able to see it on the DVD that I purchased of this movie. Until that point, this almost 3-hour movie I would be watching with commercial breaks constantly. So as I previously mentioned, not only does the movie star Steve McQueen, but it also stars James Gardner, Richard Attenborough, James Donald, Charles Bronson, and Haynes Mensmer. So one other thing about this movie is I think going into early memories of this movie, I was aware of 2 of these actors. I'm pretty sure prior to that point, I had probably seen the original Blob with Steve McQueen, and Steve McQueen looks like Steve McQueen almost any time in his acting career. So I was like, oh, I recognize that face. And the other face that I actually recognized was James Gardner, because at the time in the 70s, like the Rockford Files was on, so he was very prominent on television, all that sort of thing. So that's pretty much where I recognize him from. And it wasn't until later on in my movie watching abilities that other names like Charles Bronson and Donald Pleasance and even Richard Attenborough became more, oh, right, from The Great Escape. Oh, I didn't know that he was in The Great Escape. And again, going through the lexicon, I would go back and like, why does that guy look familiar? And then go back, oh, he was from The Great Escape. So if you haven't seen this movie, it takes place during World War II, where all these Allied forces have been captured and put into this POW camp set up by the Germans. And the whole entire process is them all working together to escape the prison. And that's the reason why these particular characters are brought to this particular camp. It's supposed to be an escape camp, and these are previous offenders of trying to escape. We're dealing with a very ensemble cast, and it is very well done. Even the smallest of the characters are not left lagging. Again, we're dealing with a fantastic cast, and again, it's the reason why I keep coming back to this movie. It's just I enjoy an ensemble cast. Whatever the situation is, if you have a well culminated cast, it definitely helps the picture. Speaking of length, the actual final escape itself, where they finally break out and the last of the men leave the tunnel before it's discovered by the Germans, is on March 25th, 1944. And again, this movie is a fictionalized version of actual events. The beginning of the movie tells you we've culminated a couple of characters together, we've condensed the timeline a little bit. The things that happen during the movie actually happen at these times. And like I said, the time that this happens is about 2 hours and 1 minute into this 2 hour and 52-minute movie. And that year's Academy Awards got it a nomination for Best Film Editing. This is going to wrap up this particular episode, and we're going to look off into the future to see what we're going to see for tomorrow, and that is going to be the 26th of March, which is going to be The World's Fastest Indian from 2005. So until next time, go see a movie. This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media. Through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.